Yesterday there was a cause for concern. So today I'm showing you the instrument panel in the Weasel. I removed the water temperature gauge. Going over to the truck. Water temperature gauge still in Oregon being worked on. The one that was in the truck was an electrical gauge. And the sending unit is still in the head. That's it right there. We had a drop in temperature. And I guess from me running the engine as I have been, keeping it exercised, one thing I didn't do was maintain the level of water in the radiator. Now this is the thermostat housing group here, and the thermostat that controls not only the temperature but the speed of the water flowing through the engine. The thermostat is inside here, and what I think happened, it took when I filled it yesterday, filled the radiator yesterday, it took 1/3 of a gallon of coolant slash antifreeze and a gallon of water, so it was low. What I think happened was whatever water was sitting in the thermostat housing froze and prevented circulation. What had happened was the engine was running, it was doing very well, and then it started to sputter, and so I shut it down. I don't have any way of monitoring the temperature, which is a little bit dangerous, and I don't want to, I don't know, maybe a $50 part to ruin a $4,000 engine. It doesn't look like it. Maybe, I think the engine was like $4,600. You know, I don't want to mess up the engine, so what I did was I pulled the thermostat out of the Weasel, and I have a canteen cup of water on the tent heater, and the tent heater is warming up. Oh, it's doing great. I'll get it close, maybe you can hear it. Now, the water's warm. So here's the temp gauge out of the Weasel. It is not an original instrument, and I know that because of those two little vision holes there for lights. But the capillary tube is intact, and it's shielded with a vinyl coating, so it is an aftermarket temp gauge. Now, I purchased a new temp gauge that's correct for the Weasel. And I could put it in the Chevy, but I don't want to use it yet. It has the same style bezel that's painted green as the original instruments in the Chevy, but this is intended for the Weasel. If this older temp gauge doesn't work, then I will install this in the Chevy just to monitor the temp until the original instrument comes back from the rebuilder. Alright, so I have my canteen cup on top of the tent heater, and there are wisps of steam, wisps of steam and bubbles. So let's pop the probe into the water and see what happens to the gauge. And it's moving. It's up at 150 degrees. Well, this is good. My left hand is starting to get very hot. Okay, so that's up about 180 degrees. Wow. And we can see it cooling off and returning to about 150. Okay, so that's good. Now all I have to do is find in my spares, find the collar, the correct collar that goes from this fitting into the cylinder head of the Chevy. And I think I might know where one is, so I'll be back. Alright, so this fitting has to go in here. This came out of the cylinder head of the Weasel, and luckily enough, both of the pipe threads going into both cylinder heads, this GM 302 head and the Weasel cylinder head, are the same. Now down there I have a bucket, and I'm going to do my best to catch as much of the coolant that I can that is now going to leave the engine. And there we go. So I'm going to pull this adapter plug out, and it takes a 7/8 inch wrench. I initially installed this plug a long time ago for the person I was building this truck for originally. That's another terrible story in itself, but there we go. Oh, I didn't lose much coolant at all. That's because the thermostat is closed and the radiator cap is on the radiator. So I think what I will do is put some grease on the large OD threads here, put this collar in place, and quickly get that thermostat installed in the truck. I have the battery charging. I'm still looking into whether or not I'm going to run a 6 volt or 12 volt system. There are some tricks that can be done with a 6 volt generator, and I prefer 12 volts a lot over 6, but that's just me. Okay, gonna stop here. Alright, so I'm in the supply closet here, and I'm gonna get out the grease Oh, there's some right there. I don't need a tremendous amount. Maybe a little bit more. I don't want to get grease all over my fingers because I don't want to get grease on the lens of the camera, which will happen. There are a few rules of, not a few rules, I would say a few options that different mechanics take. And this is just all-purpose grease. When it comes to installing things, some people say, oh, you got to use Teflon tape. Well, they didn't. Teflon tape wasn't invented back in World War II. Or they say, how about some PTFE paste, which is the same thing. Okay, well, that's fine. Grease works very well. I like it because in the future I can remove whatever I've installed with ease. And I remember greasing that threaded collar for the original sending unit. So again, this is another application where we have steel. The collar fitting is steel and the head is cast iron. So, you know, that's it right there. Again, I keep saying this in my videos, no Gorilla Tight. It doesn't need to be torqued. It's a pipe thread, so it's tapered, and the threads in the head are straight, so it'll fit in, and when the engine heats up, the head will expand just a little bit, and so will the collar, and it'll make a good seal. So I hear, yeah, that's good. You can hear the coolant that's seeping out, hitting the bucket. And I do that because the ethylene glycol is used to have a sweet flavor to it. And if you've ever seen a cat be poisoned or an animal be poisoned from ethylene glycol, it's awful. If you ever watch those crime TV shows, I mean, look at that shit. That looks like Gatorade, especially if you water it down. What happens is, when a living being ingests ethylene glycol, of course, goes into your stomach and then heads to your kidneys, where your body tries to flush it out. Well, the ethylene glycol crystallizes in the kidneys, and it's, from what I've heard and been told, it's a very painful way to die, and it's not nice. So I don't want the coolant going on the ground. And another thing that, and I don't know when they did this, manufacturers of coolant started adding a chemical called Bitrex, and B-I-T-R-E-X, and it has an extremely bitter flavor to deter animals from drinking coolant that's on the ground. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get this instrument installed, and I'll be right back. Alright, so the temp gauge is installed. Probe is in place. Put some grease on the threads. I put some primer into the throat of the carburetor. I'm going to turn the switch on, hit the button. And we'll let it warm up. It's going to take probably 8 or 10 minutes for this thing to get warm and show any results on the thermostat. So I'm going to cut it here and come back when the needle starts to move. Okay, so far so good. I'm going to get in close here. See little wisps of steam coming off the cylinder head where the spilled coolant is evaporating. Coolant level is up. The water's starting to get warm. Oh, look at that. Let's see if I can get that without any glare. Nice, she's already at 150 degrees. I think I have a 160 degree thermostat in there. The gauge has moisture on the inside, just from sitting out in the weather. So if I let the engine run and the cab get warm, it'll warm up the gauge and all that moisture will leave. So I think we're at like 160 now and it's pretty stable. So the thermostat may be open. And let's go see the coolant. Yeah, I can see the coolant flowing. So we're good. Excellent. I can monitor the engine temperature. And not have to worry about overheating the engine. Alright, so this completes this video. Thanks for watching.